All right. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being here, regardless of which part of the world you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. But today it's really a pleasure for me to announce that we have a seminar hosted by Ryuko Kubota and Ryosuke Aoyama. This is going to be a very exciting topic because the focus of the seminar is going to be on anti-racist and decolonial approaches to teaching English as an international language. Definitely a topic which is very close to my reality, a topic which I'm sure is very close to the reality of many of the attendees. So before we begin, I just want to remind you that the session is being recorded. So if you do not want to have your face on camera, if you don't want your voice to be recorded, that's all right. You can just ask questions, make comments in the chat. The chat is not being recorded. But without further ado, I will now leave the floor to Professor Kubota. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see it? Okay.
Yes.
Now I need to adjust something here. All right. So yeah, thank you so much, Paolo, Nicola, and others for inviting us to share our work. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam people here on University of British Columbia campus. Both Ryosuke and I live on campus. Okay. So during the last 40 years or more, the field of English language teaching has critiqued the normative view of English. So this critique includes focusing on world Englishes, English as a lingua franca, or translingualism, focus on plurilingual repertoires of English users, and we all know those terms. So these perspectives specifically focus on language, so linguistic forms and practices, but not language users enough, and also broader societies. So in our presentation, we will address a need for a greater focus on language users, not just language, but language users. And one of the features of language user is racial background. So we are going to talk about the conceptual foundations of race and racism. And then I will talk about the connection between anti-racism and decolonization. And also, the anti-racism and decolonization sound very promising, but there are some challenges and caveats. So I'm going to address those. And then I will hand the platform over to Ryosuke. And Ryosuke is going to talk about our work on public scholarship for knowledge mobilization, which is very important to address one of the challenges, and then conclusion. So that's our plan today. So first, need for a greater focus on language users. So we are going to draw on our article here. So I'm going to address some questions by sharing some example, this example. So this is a CNN article in 2021. So according to this article, 3 Stanford University students invented Sanas, which is AI-powered software that aims to eliminate miscommunication by changing people's accents in real time. So the idea was motivated by their friends losing his job due to his accent, or the Chinese mother's feeling of being embarrassed because of her accent, which kept her from going shopping alone. So let's hear what this software sounds like.
From that moment, his friendship for Belize turned to hatred and jealousy.
From that moment, his friendship for Belize turned to hatred and jealousy.
A combination of Canadian capital quickly organized and petitioned for the same privileges.
A combination of Canadian capital quickly organized and petitioned for the same privileges.
It was my report from the north which chiefly induced people to buy.
It was my report from the north which chiefly induced people to buy.
So you can see that idea. So according to this article, the company isn't trying to erase accents or imply that one way of speaking is better than another. The intention is to help people who are linguistically disadvantaged, right? But we want to pose some questions here. So who carries a heavier burden, the speaker or the listener? Does this device make multilingual speakers understood better? Maybe, linguistically. But if intelligibility of multilingual speakers is increased, then will they stop facing prejudice? Probably not, right? So is language the only cause of prejudice? So in other words, if Ryosuke and I eradicate our accents, then will we join the UK society without discrimination, right? So we argue that sanitizing the ways we speak does not lead to transparent communication, since communication takes place not only through language per se, but also between people from diverse backgrounds, intentions, emotions, and dispositions. So in our presentation, we will problematize tendency to mainly focus on language in the discourse of linguistic diversity, like World Englishes, ELF, and translanguaging, and propose that we pay greater attention to the relationality and power disparities among language users who shape communication in broader institutions and material worlds. So one feature of language user is their racial background. So today we're going to focus on issues of race and discuss the connection between anti-racism and decolonization, some caveats which encourage us to do more public scholarship. So we will share with you a snippet of a documentary film that we produced very recently. So conceptual foundations of race and racism, I realize the numbering is not correct. First, race is a social construct. So human genes shared by people are almost all identical, which means that race is not a biological category, but it's a social construct. But perceived racial differences are real, which leads to racial disparities and racism. Second, racism manifests in different forms. So we can think of individual or interpersonal racism, insults, but then there are forms of institutional and systemic racism. And also we see epistemological racism, which is racism within our knowledge system. Third, racism is not the only cause of oppression, and we need to think in terms of intersectionality. Race intersects with gender, class, ethnicity, language, sexuality, age, and all ability, and all other human identity categories. So anti-racism cannot be conceptualized as a catch-all remedy of social injustice. And in terms of the intersectionality between race and language, there have been some studies done by Okim Kang, Don Rubin on reverse linguistic stereotyping. They conducted experimental studies to find out how the perceived racial background of a speaker influences the listener's comprehension of the speech and evaluation of the speaker's competence. So for example, you show a picture of these instructors to group A. So group A only sees the Asian face, and group B sees only the Caucasian face. And then both group will listen to exactly the same recording of a lecture recorded by standard English, American English speaker. And then after the lecture, both group will answer comprehension test and also questionnaire about their perception of their effectiveness as the instructors, for example. And then they found the perceived speaker's race influences the listener's listening comprehension and the perception of the listener's proficiency and skills. Remember, they both listened to exactly the same recording, right? Fourth, anti-racism should be decolonized in settler colonial societies. So anti-racism in Canada, for example, tends to be advocated by settlers of color like Ryosuke and I. However, this tends to ignore the violence of settler colonialism that has caused sufferings for indigenous peoples. Oops, sorry. So settlers of color must recognize their privilege they gained from settler colonialism. So I will now talk about the connection between anti-racism and decolonization, sorry. So anti-racism, particularly when we think about epistemological racism or racism within our knowledge system, we need to ask questions like whose perspective is represented in our syllabi, textbooks, and curriculum, and so forth. And also, who do we cite in our writing? Do we cite white native English-speaking scholars or scholars of color and so forth, right? And the bias towards whiteness is worldly, so it has spread in different parts of the world. And as we saw, decolonizing anti-racism requires us to acknowledge the colonial relationship of power, not only between white settlers and settlers of color, but also between settlers of color and indigenous people. So likewise, decolonization aims to critique and overcome enduring coloniality, which is the effects of colonialism. And decolonization also aims to delink from Western epistemologies that claim their universality and rationality. And decolonization is aligned with Southern perspectives. Here, Global South is not just the geographical notion, but it has to do with marginality in terms of race, gender, language, culture, and so forth. However, from indigenous perspectives, indigenous scholars like Tuck and Young talk about the importance of the fact that decolonial perspectives must address the repatriation and reclamation of indigenous land, life, language, and culture. It's not just a metaphor. So then we can see a synergy between anti-racism and decolonization. So they both aim to disrupt unequal relations of power that exist between categories of knowledge. And both are challenged by an indigenous call for repatriation of their land, life, language, and culture. So we need to critically reflect on the power hierarchies that exist within a marginalized space. Both perspectives sound very promising, but there are challenges and caveats. So first, coloniality and Eurocentrism are deeply entrenched in academic institutions. Especially today's neoliberalism compels us to develop a competitive edge by producing knowledge, by publishing, presenting in conferences, in prestigious venues, which are often Western venues. So neoliberalism also compels elites in global South, including those in Africa and other parts of the global South, to conduct research by drawing on Western knowledge rather than indigenous knowledges. So this results in marginalizing indigenous scholarship. Furthermore, as Sabelo Nutlov-Gacheni argued, the neoliberal knowledge economy has driven African scholars to pursue power and fame. So it has also driven students to study not for cultivating knowledge, but also for gaining certificates, degrees, and socioeconomic mobility. So indeed, markets became a major agents for coloniality. So neoliberalism requires us to follow academic standards as well, including conventions in academic writing, right? So encouraging students to translanguage alone, for instance, will not lead to transformation. So transforming the system in the material world is necessary. Second, so there's a tension between local perspectives and universal justice. What I mean by this is that when we promote anti-racism and decolonization, we want to spotlight marginalized knowledges, marginalized voices. But in doing so, we may end up romanticizing those perspectives. So Musavi calls this nativist decolonization. So the problem occurs when a non-Western perspective is inconsistent with the progressive perspective produced in the West, which is well-meaning and potentially decolonizing, like ELF, right? So for example, Yu and Liu from China challenges the ELF-informed pedagogy to be implemented in China. So these Chinese scholars argue that Chinese culture demands standards for any kind of learning as an instructional model. So in the case of English language learning, the teachers and students want a standard like American and British standardized English, and that having a standard alleviates the stigma felt by Chinese learners in communicating with native speakers. That kind of makes sense. So here, we may want to honor this as a non-Western perspective, but it will perpetuate native speaker norm or a colonial norm that we want to disrupt. But then insisting on ELF-informed pedagogy may be taken as a colonial because it was produced by scholars in the global North. So we can see the circular logic here. So similar problems are seen in culturally specific discourse of justice, like LGBTQ rights, women's rights, or even anti-racism may stem from Western perspectives. So insisting on our one version of anti-racism, human rights, social justice, etc., may be inconsistent with the colonial perspectives. This is a huge challenge. Third, minoritized people like Black, Indigenous, people of color, non-native speakers, women are not necessarily advocates of anti-racist and decolonial perspectives. So as Kumalapa Dibelu points out, many of us are complicit with colonial hegemony, and we may contribute to reproduction of coloniality. And finally, we academics tend to discuss and promote anti-racism and decolonial discourses only within the academic bubble, like we're doing now. So in order to transform the real world, we need to make efforts to take result-oriented strategic actions and to do more public scholarship of knowledge mobilization. So with that, we will switch to the topic of public scholarship for knowledge mobilization, and I will hand over the microphone to Ryosuke, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Ryuko, and let me quickly share my screen. One second. Yeah, so hopefully everyone is seeing what I'm seeing. And yeah, so, okay, it's not working. Yeah, thank you again, Ryuko. And I will now explain the documentary film created by Ryuko's team and as a public scholarship. And my name is Ryosuke. I am a PhD student of TESOL from UBC. I'm an international PhD student. And yeah, I was actually a member of the film production team, conducting interviews, compiling interview excerpts, and also creating discussion questions for the viewers so that this documentary can be pedagogized in various settings. And the film was shot in Vancouver, Canada, where our team interviewed a diverse group of English speakers who originally come from various countries. And we asked many questions, and what you see on the slide are just examples. So through this film, our goal was to provide critical insights into complex interplay between language, race, colonialism, and ideologies. And we hope this film will develop, assess, and transform viewers' knowledge of and attitudes toward linguistic and human diversity. And the film consists of the 5 episodes with distinct yet interrelated themes. And then you can choose to watch a long version, full version that combines all 5 episodes, or view each episode separately. So that film is available on YouTube and offering 2 types of English subtitles, verbatim version and auto-generated version by YouTube. So the verbatim version closely transcribes the original speech, and we did that manually. And you're welcome to use these subtitles for various purposes, including just enhancing comprehension, scaffolding instructions, and analyzing linguistic features, among others. The target audience is very broad, we think, and including students, teachers, teacher educators, and school staff, primarily working in the fields related to English language education in global contexts. as well as a general audience. Again, here is a URL, blogs.ubc.ca/law English in Canada. You can scan this QR code with your smartphone if you like. And now we'd like to show one of the episodes that is closely related to the theme of this seminar. I mean, I think every episode is related to today's topic, but we're gonna play episode 4, language and race. And I'm not just showing the episode. I will talk a little bit about how it can be utilized for classroom instruction or in teacher education. So let's consider watching this episode in a university's English teacher licensure course within an EFL context. And university students may already understand the basic concepts of linguistic diversity. What is linguistic diversity? But what might not fully understand is how diverse language users with different intersectional identities such as race experience everyday life differently. So this episode aims to help them understand some of the racial linguistic ideologies experienced by real people, and some comments in the film may resonate with students. So to enrich students' learning and engagement with the film, we might first want to activate prior knowledge on the topic by asking very simple questions like, the title of the video is Language and Race. How do you think language and race are connected, or are they not connected? What is standard English? So what image do you have of standard English speakers? So then this can be facilitated through group discussions or pair work. And before playing the video, you would ask students to take notes on anything that interest, strikes, or even puzzles them. That would be while watching activities. So now I will play the video, but we'd like to request that this not be recorded. Paolo, yeah, you can start the recording. And if you are watching this seminar on YouTube, we just watched an episode 4, so please go to the link we shared earlier. So play the recording of the episode 4 and come back. And regarding classroom application, post-viewing activities may include group discussions and reflecting writing. And the yellow box displays the potential stimulus questions and for these post-viewing activities, which are also available on our website. If you found today's episode very interesting, so please consider viewing other episodes, and please explore how these episodes can be used pedagogizing in your context, in your classroom, in teacher education. And we believe the film can be used in various contexts, and some episodes were actually already used in some courses in UBC, and we received a very good feedback from instructors. So yeah, that's all from me, and I will now hand it over to Ryuko for conclusion.
Okay, so in conclusion, first, in pursuing pluralistic approaches to language teaching, we need to expand our focus from linguistic forms and practices to language users. Second, in engaging with anti-racism and decolonization, we should exercise critical reflexivity regarding the multiple perspectives in the real world, including attention between the Western perspective of social justice and different values in the global South. And also in settler colonial societies, we need to disrupt settler colonialism, and we must critically and vigilantly engage with relativism and essentialism. And finally, we must take result-oriented action outside of our academic bubble. So here are some references. Ryosuke, please click. Yep, thank you. and thank you very much. Our email addresses are on the next slide. So if you have any questions, please contact us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this presentation and for the showing of the documentary, Professor Kubota and Ryosuke. I think this really relates, as I said at the beginning, to the reality of many of the attendees. So I would like to ask the audience if you have any questions for our speakers right now. And again, if you do not feel like showing your face or speaking up, you can just use the chat. But yeah, okay, I think, yeah, we have somebody requesting to show one of the slide with the sources again. That would be the reference slide,
Yeah.
right?
I can do that quickly. Yeah, sorry, my computer is a little bit slow today,
No worries.
especially when I am presenting over Zoom. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ryosuke. Right. While we wait for somebody, I do have some questions because this is something which is, as I mentioned, very close to what I'm interested in. And I was interested in the definition that you gave at a certain point of the presentation about the Southern perspective, that you mentioned that it wasn't just, when you said Southern, it wasn't meant just in terms of geography, but also in other regards. And although I think I understand what you meant, could you expand upon it a little more?
Sure. Yes. So Southern perspectives are promoted by various people. Several years ago, Simfrey Makoni and Alistair Pennycook published a book on that, and so it is the perspectives of the global South. So global South, I mean, in terms of geography, their knowledge, culture, people are underrepresented in various aspects of social academic lives, right? So they have promoted, I mean, scholars have promoted to shed more light on the global South in terms of understanding their perspectives, knowledges, cultures, and so forth. But at the same time, it is not just the global South, because in global South, geographically, there are some economically advanced regions and countries, like, South Africa may be more advanced than other parts of Africa. So, and also in global North, for example, in North America, there are some locations where socioeconomic status is less advanced than other parts of the region, and also in terms of population and social class and other segments of the population, there are marginalized people than others. So so Southern perspectives, in my understanding, is to really highlight those marginalized voices and spaces in the world. However, that can also become a little bit of a catch-all notion that kind of become diluted. So yeah, and also decolonization as well, because it has become a very popularized notion in the last couple of years. And even like translanguaging, a lot of people talk about those notions, but then what does that really mean, right? So we need to think about or clarify our definition of what we are talking about and what needs to be highlighted and what kind of knowledges, voices need to be put forward a little bit more. So yeah, so it's all about power relations to some extent in terms of various identity categories. So I hope I answered your question.
Definitely, definitely. I see something in the chat right now. Somebody asked, very insightful talk. I'm a master student in Beijing, China. I'm interested in global Englishes. I totally agree with the circular logic since GE is raised by global North scholars in the Chinese contexts. I can see there are many problems in implementing it to the extent that I start to question who is GE really for? So not a question, but a comment. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's a very sensitive and difficult question. But as English has become a world language, it's used by so many people in different parts of the world, and by so many different people from racial backgrounds, and there are still a lot of cases of discrimination against non-native English speakers and English speakers of color. So in my personal view, we need to promote more diversity of linguistic variations as well as human diversity of English speakers. So anyway.
right. I think Mona raised their hands first.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what the right etiquette is. As a German, we like to raise our hand to ask a question. Thank you so much, Alexandra. Are you German too? Yeah, the two Germans. I had a feeling there, but I just learned to not make assumptions based on a name or anything. So, thank you so much for your presentation. Let me see if I can get this question properly right, because it's in my head. I just need to put it in good words. So I was wondering, because this was focused on English, obviously, and decolonization. And with English as a global language, we also have, these discussions around linguistic imperialism. And obviously, with what English is in the world, it holds a very high resource value. It's a very important commodity for many people. So I was wondering if there's any, maybe not comparative studies, but how this situation with English and sort of the value of standard English, not the value that is attached by some people to standard English and speakers of other Englishes, if there are studies that investigate this dynamic in comparison with other languages, with other diverse and kind of very varied languages, or if there is something very specific about English, and if this can be connected to the, I guess, very unique history that English has had in this world.
Mhm. Yeah, very good question. I think the diversity of language applies to any language, right? So we just happen to pick English as a topic of our exploration because, it's used and taught in so many different countries, and there have been a lot of issues of the perception that standard English is more superior, the speakers of standardized English is superior, and so forth. And we wanted to disrupt those beliefs. So that's why we focus on English. However, I think same thing can be said for other languages as well. And if you look at watch other episodes, there are some the scenes where people talk about other languages and the misconception of the people in India speaking only one language. And so you can watch the whole video and gain some insight, and you can actually use the video for classroom discussion, like Ryosuke mentioned, in any way you want. So I think that scene could trigger a very interesting conversation about languages in different countries and how people perceive sort of national language and so forth. So Ryosuke, if you have any comments, please jump in anytime. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, I wanted to comment on that. I will be allowed to teach my first Global English as Language teaching seminar from next year. So thank you again for saying that, because I was going to ask if this is freely available for people to use, and I definitely will, and will let you know how it was perceived by the students. Thank you.
Yeah, so Ryosuke, can you talk a little bit about availability of this video?
Availability of this.
Of the video, the episodes and videos. Would you like to explain a little bit about how the videos are made available and so forth?
Yeah, it's basically available on YouTube. Yeah, so if you go to the website, yeah, it has a list of the episodes, right? And then also, if you click on each episode, it goes to individual episode page with questions, for example, for before watching, while watching, and after watching, so tasks. So I think it can be used for many purposes, and even students, teachers, and school staff, and I think it can be very versatile. And yeah,
Thank you
just to
so
follow
much.
up on just to follow up on what you said, I think personally, I think that what you asked us can be asked for students as well, I think. So with students know, of course, students has a first language, and then they can realize how diverse that first language is, and then they can compare that to the second language, third language, English language. So how is it different? How diversity can be different, and it can be the same. So that's something students can or teachers can think about, I think.
Thank you so much.
I posted the website, so you can go to that website. And I have to remind everybody that the subtitle, the verbatim subtitle, is still work in progress, to just tweak some issues. So it's not really the final version. We have been saying that for over a year, and it's been a long process, but it will eventually finish. So.
That's great. Thank you.